I'd like to start with a clip from Why I Will Not Vote for Joe Biden by Hamid Dabashi. The Ethics of Ultimate Responsibility. The task of my sort of critical thinkers is not to jump on the bandwagon and rush to vote for Biden and his running mate Kamala Harris reluctantly. Generations of critical thinkers, from Rosa Luxemburg to Aimé Césaire to Frantz Fanon to Edward Said to Arundhati Roy, did not live and think and write for us to cast a strategic vote for a reactionary liberal, an unrepentant warmonger, a hardcore Zionist with a record of racism and alleged sexual abuse. In his famous essay, Politics as Vocation, 1919, the eminent German sociologist Max Weber made a crucial distinction between an ethics of responsibility and an ethics of ultimate end that to this day remain a hallmark of moral choice in politics. We must be clear, he told his audience at the University of Munich, about the fact that all ethically oriented conduct may be guided by one of two fundamentally differing and irreconcilably opposed maxims. Conduct can be oriented to an ethic of ultimate ends or to an ethic of responsibility. But in between the two choices Weber left us emerges a third, an ethic of ultimate responsibility. Our specific and ultimate responsibility today is not to rush to vote for a lesser evil, as I also argued about 4 years ago when the choice was between Trump and Clinton, but to sustain the course of critical thinking that seeks to overcome both evils. More than 300 million human beings trapped to choose between a Coke and a Pepsi deserve and must strive for a healthier choice. An entire planet at the mercy of U.S. militarism and warmongering most certainly has everything to lose from either of these two American calamities. Every day I bring you new ideas from brilliant thinkers who back up their ideas with facts and well-supported logic. I often agree with almost everything they say. Sometimes I totally disagree. But through it all comes the agenda that started this show in the first place, which was the idea of Bernie or bust. In short, the underlying premise of this entire show is electoral leverage. Today I'll bring you some of the ideas from 3 different writers, and I'll try to weave them together with the idea that we need to hold our fellow voters accountable more than we need to hold DNC insiders accountable. It can be very difficult to let go of the idea that we can solve our problems at the ballot box. And while I wouldn't mind if this show evolved into a clearinghouse for different ways to protest and strike effectively, I still think there is a place for electoral leverage. Yes, we've determined again that in this election cycle, we don't have anyone for whom we can vote who is progressive. And until we amass as many billions of dollars as the DNC donors have, we'll never be able to put more pressure on the DNC insiders than the moguls do. But one thing that most of my readers and listeners have noticed in both of the last 2 election cycles is that the DNC insiders spend a lot of effort managing our consent. They spend a lot of time, effort, and money on mainstream media messaging. They spend a lot of time and money on narrative management so that they can control the way comfy Democrats think about politics. It stands to reason that if they spend so much effort trying to control the narrative and trying to control the way the people who watch mainstream media think, that there must be some powerful reasons to do so. So if those of us on the left who identify with workers, especially impoverished workers, want to change anything, we probably will have to compete with mainstream media and those who pay the mainstream media for the hearts and minds and thoughts of our fellow voters. The algorithms on YouTube and on Twitter and on Facebook make it difficult for the small media people to get their messages out. But electoral leverage is one way we can push the voters around with a small budget. This is the idea that we need to make go viral. If 80% of people who supported Bernie in the last 2 election cycles decided to send the message clearly and without any blinking that we will never ever vote for corporatist candidates in primary elections ever again, The DNC insiders might not care, but our fellow voters would probably blink if the snide, snarky, sneering, snarling Democrats we see on our Facebook pages really believed that we wouldn't blink first. It would affect their behavior. And in the final analysis, we would then be able to compete with mainstream media with a much smaller budget. Some of the mainstream media, like USA Today, would even help us get the word out. Emerson Polling and Morning Consult would help us get the word out. If 80% of Bernie supporters just simply said, we will not vote for corporatists, the polling would pick it up and some of the media would pick it up. A majority of Americans support Bernie's party platform. Now, if the DNC provided candidates who were actually moderate as opposed to right-wingers, it would be more difficult to use this leverage strategy. But the DNC keeps serving us up purely evil candidates. And that's why this will work if we can find a critical mass of voters who are truly progressive, who won't blink first, who will face down the comfy suburbanites and tell them, nope, no more, we're not voting for your shitty candidates ever again. And so here's the message we need to deliver to the lefty pundits. We also can't blink. We also can't allow left-leaning voters to vote for corporatists under any circumstances. We have to keep them on the hook in the same way that union people hold each other accountable for not being scabs. And if we hold the line, the comfy suburbanites who really hate Republicans will toe our line instead of the other way around. And that's why, dear viewers and listeners, I keep harping on you to get the word out to our favorite lefty pundits and to your fellow voters that we simply can't keep voting for lesser evil candidates. We need to push our fellow voters harder than the mainstream media can push them. If voting is ever going to matter again, we have to use electoral leverage as well as riots and protests to get the job done. So here are some more reasons not to vote for the current corporatist. Let's begin with Hamid Dabashi, who explains why he will not vote for Joe Biden. I'm going to skip the part where he apologizes for people like Cornel West and Noam Chomsky, and I'm going to skip right to his argument. As you know, I feel no need to apologize for Norm Solomon or Noam Chomsky or Cornel West. If they tell us they're voting for a corporatist, they can go fuck off. Hamid is much more polite than I am about this issue. And if you've been following my line of reasoning, you'll know why this more militant attitude is required. But still, I will never vote for Biden, for I believe the function of people like me is entirely different from even those among the American left with whom I wholeheartedly identify. He means Noam, Cornel, etc. The task of critical thinking at this point is not to rush to declare we are voting for Biden, an unrepentant, racist, and self-declared Zionist with a frightening record of misogyny who has actively supported the Iraq War. We had a far superior choice in Bernie Sanders, but twice in a row the Democratic Party made absolutely sure to kill his chances. The task at hand is to sustain the course of critical thinking that could not possibly embrace Biden. Voting for Biden is voting for the very foundation of a political culture that has a whole platoon of Trumps and Bidens waiting to surface. If we choose between Trump and Biden today, next time we will have to choose between Ivanka Trump and Chelsea Clinton. This vicious cycle can only come to an end through a sustained and uncompromising course of critical thinking against the very grain of this political culture that demonizes the Black Lives Matter uprising, celebrates neo-Nazis, and canonizes Hillary Clinton and Biden as God-given salvation against this murderous banality. Now, this is me speaking, and I'm saying that it's even simpler than that. Even though we do need a sustained and uncompromising course of critical thinking, the leverage that will actually do the job is simply to stop voting for corporatists, ever again. If we do that, the comfy Dems will have nothing else to do but either vote for Republicans or vote for our progressive candidates. Otherwise, they'll just have to resign themselves to losing. And you know they absolutely fucking hate that. The DNC insiders don't care if they win or lose, but the comfy Democrats care. That's why I'm viciously critical of any pundits that let leftists off the hook and say, oh well, I guess you can succumb to lesser evilism this time. Just look at how much is at stake. Fuck that shit. For Christ's sake. All we need to do is just look squarely at what the DNC is offering. Joe Biden touts endorsement from the guy who poisoned Flint, Michigan. This is a Gizmodo article from Darna Noor. Joe Biden can, once again, fuck off. After spending months making overtures to environmental organizers about how he's listening to them, creating a task force with Green New Deal backing Sanders supporters, and strengthening some parts of his climate plan, the Democratic presidential nominee seems to be taking that support for granted. Earlier this week, Biden reiterated that he doesn't plan to ban fracking. Then on Thursday, Dude's campaign publicized the endorsement of environmental villain Rick Snyder. I know Biden is trying to win an election, but to do so, he's going to have to win over many skeptics who would have preferred a candidate farther to the left. By not only accepting former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder's pledged vote, but also amplifying Snyder's endorsement by emailing supporters to check out his op-ed, his campaign seems to be signaling to those voters that he doesn't care about them at all and is willing to jeopardize their support for an infamous also-ran Republican. As a reminder, Snyder is the former Republican governor of Michigan who had a massive role in the majority black city of Flint's lead-poisoned water crisis. In 2013, he appointed an emergency manager who prioritized profits over Flint residents' safety, allowing their water supply to be privatized and switched to a tainted source. You know what happened next. Nearly 100,000 people were exposed to lead-tainted water. A dozen died of Legionnaire's disease, and an estimated several hundred pregnancies ended in stillbirths. There's evidence Snyder knew the water crisis was on the way before it started, and that he went to great lengths to cover it up. He somehow wasn't charged with a crime, though he is being sued. In an op-ed in USA Today on Thursday endorsing Biden, Snyder noted that President Trump lacks a moral compass and ignores the truth and facts and science. Funny, it seems, he and the president actually have those traits in common. And if that isn't enough for you, Democrat Biden adds former rival Buttigieg ex-Obama officials to transition team. I'm not sure who wrote this, but it's from Reuters. Just look at that photo. Just look at those two rat shit assholes. This is what it looks like when you pass the torch of evil from the older generation to the younger generation. Biden added 4 new co-chairs to the team led by his longtime ally Ted Kaufman, New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, former Obama economic advisor Jeffrey Zients, Louisiana Representative Cedric Richmond, and his campaign advisor Anita Dunn of SKD Knickerbocker fame. If you don't know that story, it's the catch and kill operation where the National Women's Law Center, working in conjunction with the Me Too movement, keeps anybody from challenging famous, powerful men who have been accused of rape allegations. Yes, that Anita Dunn. So to all the true leftists out there, this is the fucking swamp. Nobody's trying to drain it. You know what to do. In addition to fomenting rebellion in the streets, we all need to get on our Facebook feeds and Twitter feeds and other social media accounts and hold our fellow voters responsible. We can't be sitting in Bernie groups and saying, oh yeah, well, maybe it is okay to vote for Biden. Maybe it is okay to vote for Hillary. Maybe Cornel West is right. Maybe Noam Chomsky is right. Maybe the evil really is that bad this time. The truly disheartening part of all this is that nobody else is telling you this. Jimmy Dore is a little bit, and Tim Black is a little bit, but even they aren't advocating for outright and open hostility and vote shaming with our fellow voters who think they can vote for Joe fucking Biden. Only the militant Bernie or bust attitude is going to do anything. I have to say that Richard Medhurst actually succeeds here. I don't want to forget about him. His voice is much louder than mine, but it's not as loud as Kyle Kulinski and Jimmy Dore. His voice also is not louder than Tim Black's. None of them are shouting down the little assholes like Vosh. They're also not holding David Dole or the Young Turks accountable when they tell us to vote for Biden. Not only do we have to hold our fellow voters accountable, we also have to hold our favorite lefty pundits accountable. So if it frustrates you that this militant message of never corporatists, never allow friends to vote for corporate sock puppets ever is not getting out there, then we need to get this word out together. We need to work together to stop letting sheepdogs off the hook and to stop allowing our fellow voters to listen to them. I've really enjoyed the conversations that get started underneath the YouTube videos, and I hope these conversations will spread to the social media network. We need to be the yeast that leavens the entire loaf of bread.